At Thrifty Foods, we love to help nonprofits, charities, and schools. Our Thrifty Foods Smile Card bulk program allows organizations to immediately save up to 6% on the purchase of Smile Cards in bulk, allowing you to keep more money in your organization's pockets. Ask for details at Thrifty Foods in Parksville, a proud sponsor of the Pulse podcast with Peter and Dave.
Here come Peter, here comes Dave. Oh, listen. Bringing stories, making waves, no missing. Spinning tales in the podcast cave, so sweet. Laughs and insights everywhere, what a treat. Peter and Dave, they're on the mics, all right. Join the ride, it's gonna feel just right.
Here we go with the debut edition of the Pulse Community Podcast with Peter and Dave. He is Peter McCully.
And he is Super Dave Graham.
Oh, I haven't heard that in a while. On this episode of the podcast, we are going to be chatting with Jordan Schley about his online health clinic, and he's opening a storefront clinic in Qualicum Beach.
During the pandemic, we've learned a ton of what can be done virtual, and a lot of it can be done. 90% of things can be completed at very good use of efficient time, doctor's time as well, and then having that less wait time and overhead. It's a primary care focused in all scopes in general practice. That's how it works. And we focus on virtual. We have a clinic open up in Oak Bay, and then we'll have one open up in Qualicum.
We'll also have our first installment of a series on book banter. On this podcast, we'll chat with Brian Weber of Fireside Books, and we'll find out what folks are reading.
Oh, man, it's hard to throw a stone on the island and not hit an author or an artist. There's so much talent around here. I'll give you an example. He's down in Victoria now. His name's Shannon Sin. People may recognize his first book, The Haunting of Vancouver Island. It's done very well. He's operating in his own small press now, so they've had some anthologies come out. He's had 2 of those come out. They're going to be doing more. He connects with Western Canadian authors.
Technology is a wonderful thing, and it allows you to tell us what you think of the podcast on our Speak to Us online link. You can use your phone or your computer to speak to us in your own words, in your own voice, and you can also text us. If you have a comment on an interview, maybe a suggestion for a guest, or would like to reply to a question we might have, just click the link.
Soon we'll start our weekly contests where you can win a prize that we have hidden. Actually, I'll tell you right now where it is. It's in the tickle trunk. Now it's up to you to guess where the tickle trunk is. Now, this is a virtual game, so it could be pretty much anywhere. We'll offer up a clue, and you can text or email us to have your name put in the weekly draw.
The Pulse Community Podcast is sponsored in part by the SOS. For more than 55 years, the SOS Caring for Community at Christmas program has ensured that local children, youth, adults, and seniors experience the joy of the holidays. The thrill of finding a gift under the tree, the happiness that comes from sharing food that has special meaning. To donate to the SOS Caring for Community at Christmas program, visit sosd69.com or call 250-248-2093.
The Pulse Community Podcast is brought to you in part by M&N Mattress and Furniture Gallery. All mattresses at M&N Mattresses are made in British Columbia. The latex comes from rubberwood trees in Sri Lanka. Take the 60-second rest test at parksvillemattress.com. Visit the showroom at 291 East Island Highway in Parksville. Dave, I did take the rest test there one day. It lasted like 90 minutes. They brought me a coffee after I woke up. It was great. They brought me a paper. Oh.
It's funny. I was going to ask, what's the fastest you've ever gone in a bed? But that sounded funny. What I meant was, have you ever raced a bed?
Raced a bed? Mm-hmm. Oh, the bed racing thing. No.
Yes, you remember that? That I don't think we do that anymore. I'm not sure. Being in the media as we have, there are all kinds of opportunities. I've gone fishing out of a hot air balloon and raced cars and gone up in all kinds of flying things. I was in a food eating contest, but that's a whole other story. But once to get involved in a bed race, it was down a main street somewhere in a small town. And the radio station I was with, along with a handful of others, was, I guess we were a late entry. So we ended up with the bed that must have been rejected by everybody else. So long story short, we ended up all winded very quickly and so far behind it was becoming embarrassing. So we turned it into a bit of a PR jaunt. We had some swag with us, and we walked the rest of the route handing out goods and pleased the crowd, and it turned lemon into lemonade.
Did the bed have one of those crazy casters like you get it once in a while with the cart at the grocery store?
Exactly to the problem, I think it was. It's not like I haven't gotten over this or anything. I mean, it was embarrassing, but all the other beds, I think they had those big bike wheels. We had these little casters that might have been an office chair reject. I don't know.
Speaking of races, since you brought that up, in my career as well, I've had some crazy media races. And the craziest, I think, was an elephant race.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there was a small circus in town for 3 or 4 days in one of the small towns I was working at. And so they did a little race between one of the folks at the newspaper and I, who worked at the radio station at the time. They gave us a step ladder and we climbed up on this elephant. There's 2 of us side by side and away we go.
Oh, good one.
Nothing stranger. It was very strange.
Here we sit at the front of a veritable team of people. We have help in putting this podcast together, of course. I think it's time to introduce one of our team members. Peter, would you do the honors?
Dave, I'd like to introduce you to Marilyn. You can see her over there in Studio C through the glass. She's in charge of all things production, which includes our green room. There's a virtual green room because some folks that appear on the podcast can't actually make it into the studio. So we talk to them via Zoom or some other online chat room. And sometimes they're in the studio. So it's her job to get them into the studio, make sure they're comfortable, prepare them for all that is us.
I don't know if there's any real way to do that, but she does give it a good go. So yes, indeed, it is time for our first guest, Marilyn, who is in the green room.
Brian Weber of Fireside Books in Parksville is in the green room. We'll find out what folks are reading on this edition of Book Banter. Brian talks about island authors, and with Christmas coming up, has a few suggestions for gift giving.
Welcome to the podcast, Brian. Let's start at the beginning, how you got into this business.
I've been in retail pretty much my whole life. I had a 28-year career in what I'd call large retail. So when I stepped out of that, my wife and I had some decisions to make, whether we needed to stay on the island or continue to pursue that line. So we decided we'd be crazy to leave the islands. We started looking around for small business. And as it happened, a bookstore was up for sale around that time. I've been an avid reader my whole life, and things just went from there. So we took a chance on a used bookstore that was just a few months away from shutting its doors. And we decided to breathe some life into it, to give it some new direction. Here we are almost 8 years later in a new location, and things are just flying along.
As an avid reader, then, are you pretty much in heaven here?
Oh, yes. It's very hard to have a bad day in a bookstore.
We're getting close to Christmas. I hardly need stating, but with that in mind, any books that are safe bets for gifts or any just general suggestions?
So many to choose from, but a few that are hot right now. Definitely in terms of local interest, we have Iona Wishaw, who's a BC bestseller, writes mystery, and she's had her latest book out and another one coming. And of course, Louise Penny, Canadian mystery author. She just released her latest title, The Grey Wolf, and that's been in the top seller list since it launched. In terms of nonfiction, you've got the author of Sapiens has Nexus out. We've got Malcolm Gladwell with Revenge of the Tipping Point, and we would have to have probably a few hours to go into even more titles, but there is just a huge amount of great titles, both fiction and nonfiction out there.
I take it this is a pretty good area for readers.
It is. It's an interesting dynamic. So we do have in Parksville, Qualicum area, the Oceanside area, very avid readers. But we also have a very transient population. So we have the tourist base coming through. Fall and winter, we've got Canadian snowbirds. And summertime, we've got people from all over the world coming through here. Amazingly, they're all well-read, and they like picking up books while they're here.
Now, I've heard the term mystery mentioned a couple of times already. That's one of the top genres?
It is. I would say that's our top genre that we sell here. Very high interest in that regard, whether it's local Canadian mystery like the 2 I mentioned. A lot of people like UK authors, and anywhere from hardcore crime to the very cozy end of things like the Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Laurie Gilmore. That's really taken off this year.
Are you in the know in terms of what is going to be coming down in, say, months' time?
Yes, and people can easily access online, whether it's through our website or going on to Goodreads or any of those sites. We got one coming out by Angela Merkel called Freedom. In the political spectrum, we got Bill Clinton with a new book coming out. And a little closer to home, Mark Carney's got a book coming out soon as well. So lots of choices from nonfiction and fiction, of course. Just all the major authors will have new stuff coming out in the next 6 months. So,
how are we doing for local or regional talent in terms of authors?
Oh man, it's hard to throw a stone on the island and not hit an author or an artist. There's so much talent around here. I'll give you an example. He's down in Victoria now. His name's Shannon Sin. People may recognize his first book, The Haunting of Vancouver Island. It's done very well. He's operating in his own small press now, so they've had some anthologies come out. He's had 2 of those come out. They're going to be doing more. He connects with Western Canadian authors. So whether they're island-based, BC, or through the prairies, he taps into that talent and they bring some short stories together. Another BC author is Bill Arnott. He did a book on Vancouver Island, just a really quick short read, but just very well written. You meet some of the nicest people, and he's definitely one of them.
So you love reading books. You're a small business owner. I imagine your spare time for reading is quite precious. What do you turn to?
My lane's always been sci-fi fantasy from a very early age. I do branch out once in a while and get in a few nonfiction titles, but that's the lane I stay in. Currently reading Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings. I've read his Mistborn series. It's interesting to see because I started back in the 80s. It was a very narrow lane at that point, and now it's become very mainstream. Fantasy has really taken off, but so has romance, and the two are actually blending quite well together. So what they call romantasy books out there now, and it's one of the top categories.
That's so cool. From Fireside Books, Brian Weber, thanks for joining the podcast.
Thank you very much, Dave.
It's interesting to see how many people discover book series from TV and movies these days. I was chatting with someone recently who had no idea that the popular Lincoln Lawyer TV series, I think it's in its 3rd season now, was a best-selling book series. I've read all of them. Same guy wrote the Bosch series.
Lincoln Lawyer is a TV series, is it?
Yes.
I think I could probably work in a bookstore if this podcast thing doesn't work out. At least now I know a guy who owns one.
Dave, you've been around radio stations for many years. You were the morning guy at the Beach Radio for a long time. Did you start broadcasting in Ontario, which, of course, most people know is the center of the earth?
Yes, I got over that concept. I realize now right here is indeed the center of it all. I'm BC born, island born indeed. I ended up in Ontario for a time before I completed high school. I began my broadcast career and then went here and there and then up there and then down there and then I ended up at the beach. Now here we are. And Peter, I know you were publisher of the Parksville Quallaga Beach News for many years, but really the only reason I allow you into my circle is because you are, in fact, of course, a radio guy.
That's right. I started in cable television first, actually, and then went on to radio, to print, back to radio, back to print, back to radio, back to print, and now it's podcasts.
Interesting. We should both have our first media exposure being cable television. I, too, had that opportunity while still a kid in high school.
I found out something about you that I thought was interesting. When I was emailing you here earlier today, part of your email address is DJ Graham, and I thought, DJ Graham, isn't that cute? Like he's worked his profession into his email address, right? DJ. And then I found out it was actually your name.
And I can thank my father, who was named James, and there's the J, and it was fate.
Well, I think it's obvious just from us meeting for coffee every once in a while that we both missed our connection to the community. All those groups that we've met over the years, business people, and that's why we started the podcast, The Pulse, so we can reconnect with those folks and connect them to a new listening audience.
And many people are delighted to see you back in the public as well, Peter, and back connected with the community again. And of course, personally, I'm just delighted to have another chance to hang out with my pal, only in a different format.
Yep, it's going to be fun and informative and fun and informative. By the way, you'll find us on Facebook and Instagram as well for all those folks who like social media.
Okay, let's check and see who Marilyn has waiting in the green room to talk with us.
Well, guys, Jordan Schley of Care to Talk is in the green room. Jordan is a native of Qualicum Beach who has been working in the healthcare field the past few years. He created an online healthcare business called Care to Talk and recently opened a private healthcare clinic in Oak Bay. Jordan plans to open another private clinic in Qualicum Beach in the spring of 2025.
Welcome to the podcast, Jordan.
Thanks for having me.
We met some years ago when you were working in the family business, so to speak, which at the time was Quality Foods. How did you become involved in the healthcare industry?
It's a bit of an interesting space to be in, especially with no healthcare background. But after the company got acquired by Pattison, it was just a good opportunity to explore different ventures. In Victoria, it's a nice tech hub. Just get people with the investor side, technology side, and more proactive of what's happening. During the pandemic, we started up a company. We offered basically a simple one-touch communication to seniors, to loved ones, and vice versa. So we saw a gap between not enough care providers helping support bridging Zoom calls for video calls for seniors. At one point during the pandemic, 12 or 13 different countries calling in to Canada. It was nice to see that global connectivity on a small scale, of course, but it was more or less watching seniors engage in video conversations, which was new, and FaceTime is relatively new to them. It was nice to see those reactions. And so the pandemic kind of ended. Everyone came back to in-person visits in care communities, and that's independent living, assisted living. We had a pivot, and so we pivoted in with a good kind of healthcare team investor base in to offer primary care to everyone of all ages. But we still kept the senior component where a child can book a doctor's appointment for mom or dad, or maybe in the care community. So there's still that connectivity of mom or dad not doing well. Let me get them a doctor's appointment through the Care Talk kind of portals. We did more add-ons, and we still focus on the senior side, but the bigger target is obviously the general population. That's what kind of morphed it, and we're coming up to our 4-year anniversary. There's been ups and downs and hurdles and pivots, but I think we've landed in a position where primary care still seems to be a major focus across Canada, so it's not just BC. And so that's where we ended up. And we're still continuing to get feedback from customers, how to improve. And so we're trying to build this focus on patients and really give them the best outcomes there.
So Jordan, just to go back to something you mentioned at the start, when you were building this technology, you made it a very easy tool to use for seniors or anybody who's challenged by technology. So it was like a one step, I'm going to talk to this other person?
They're just small tablets, and they're completely dumbing down. When the loved one calls in, senior taps, answer call, it bridges the call, and then either end hangs up, it just ends the call. The main family member can actually add the family members throughout their family, and so anyone now has access, can just call the tablet, or senior can just scroll up and down and just hit a button and a call. Very, very simple. And then it eliminates all those spam calls. Some people got rid of their cell phones because they only talked to 2 or 3 family members. So it eliminated that cell plan, but then maybe being scammed. So there was actually the video really controlled in a controlled way. So that's what started origin story of Care Talk, is focused on senior care. And
so Care to Talk is an online clinic of sorts. Some might refer to it as telehealth. So can you outline how that works? Walk us through it.
It's primary care, like you would have in a nurse practitioner or doctor's clinic, but could be done virtual. So during the pandemic, we've learned a ton of what can be done virtual, and a lot of it can be done. 90% of things can be completed at very good use of efficient time, doctor's time as well, and then having that less wait time and overhead. It's a primary care focused in all scopes in general practice. That's how it works. And we focus on virtual. We have a clinic opening up in Oak Bay, and then we'll have one open up in Qualicum in April, May 2025. And so we'll add that kind of in-person touch as well for the demographic that looking for that hybrid model, but become very efficient when you do a virtual hybrid model instead of the in-person.
In the virtual hybrid model, you can chat with a doctor and get a referral or a prescription?
Yeah, you can get all that stuff done. And our appointments are 30 minutes long. So if it's an in-person visit, it's 30 minutes long. You get on multiple issues too, so you don't have to pick your worst one and then rebook the next day. Our philosophy is whatever issue you have, let's work it all out now. And so if you need all these, if you have 3 concerns because you haven't seen a doctor in a year or two, let's talk about it, and then rebook the next day. And so really take a proactive approach on your health needs, because what typically happens now is you pick your worst thing, if something does come up, you might not get in around 3 more weeks. And if the results come back from the first thing, then you have to cancel the second thing. So it becomes a very backlog approach. We've seen it. We caught multiple issues that if it wouldn't have got seen quicker, it could have been maybe next stage in someone's health journey, which would cause actually more issues on the hospital system. So there is something to say with multiple issues per visit from a proactive standpoint, and it does reduce some pressure on the other systems out there in the healthcare world. That's what we offer from our virtual side.
And where does the medical staff come from that works on the online system?
We hire locally. We don't pay for any kind of advertising. It's based internal referral. We made our healthcare recruitment quite easy in a way where they tell us what they want. So if they want to work 4 hours a week, or if they want to work 40 hours a week, they just tell us. And then we say, what's your schedule like? They give us their schedule and we just adopt it. We have a good example where we have a mom on our team. She has kids. She drops her kids off at school, picks them up at school, and then has 5 hours a day. And so there's that perfect hybrid kind of model where like work when you want. And we always just say, provide your schedule a month in advance. So life comes up, we adjust, and it makes it easier to recruit folks on that side.
Primarily, you're looking at customers on Vancouver Island. Since this is a global business, I would imagine that you have customers, patients in other places?
We operate in Western Canada, so we can see folks from BC and Ontario. We put a lot of our focus on BC right now, just because we hear the news, we're listening to them, and you just hear the stories every day. There's a healthcare problem or a hospital closed or no staff here. And so when we get that data back, we just then target that area. And our marketing does shift and really target where we're focusing in. And with our clinic coming in Qualicum, we'll probably start with 500 seats in Qualicum and pre-sell those seats and then create a wait list for folks. And we'll track people from Oceanside, Nanaimo, maybe Comox. And so have that kind of bigger audience, but we'll focus in BC. And then early next year, we'll be heavily targeting Alberta and Ontario. And just because the federal election coming off in Ontario, so it makes sense to go that way.
With the success of the online healthcare clinic and now the bricks and mortar clinics in Oak Bay and one planned for Qualicum, what were the factors that pushed you in that direction to decide to open a bricks and mortar location?
I was probably the last person to go because I didn't want to get into it because there is overhead. There is the pay of running a brick-and-mortar clinic. We built our company virtual, so to go into in-person, it's hard to attract people in person. There's systems in place. And then, of course, when you have a location, people will think it's just a walk-in clinic. And so we just put a kind of a survey out in Victoria. We about 3,000 people in that area. And we said, if we open a clinic, who would opt in? And the numbers convinced to do that direction. So we never wanted to do it, but it was really the patients who wanted that. And we do have some major walk-in clinics that have closed down in Victoria, those urgent primary care clinics. I know one in Langford, you have to get there at 6 a.m. before you get your seat. If you get there at 9 a.m., you can't get in. We just listen. And maybe that's the difference between big companies can't be as reactive. And the same thing came up in Qualicum. We put some signs up on some streets and we got phone calls. It's just this model where we don't want to focus on brick and mortar, but I think there is a need in certain communities, especially if there is partnerships in place with government bodies or cities where they help endorse it. And we're seeing that happen right now in Colwood. The city of Colwood's opening up their own private clinic for all Colwood residents. So it's going to be interesting to see that come out and play in May next year. So some good stuff coming. At least everyone's trying different things instead of watching a newspaper, the old base bail repeats.
Are people warming to the idea of a healthcare model where they have to pay an additional fee on a monthly or an annual basis, like having private healthcare insurance?
It's a mixed bag. I think we're just in life general paying for things. So with the chiropractor, dentist, physio, they're all paying for it. And so I'm saying that we do pay an MSP. I think that's where you get the basics. If you pay an MSP, you get the basic healthcare, and that says it's a 4 week, 6 week. You might have a doctor, might not. But you get the hospital system. So I think that's something that you get, you don't have to pay for. But to have that kind of private primary care with patient navigator, you got support staff, you got either a doctor or a nurse practitioner. I think that's always upcharged. On the personal income tax, they allow for private healthcare. There is obviously a tax deduction on that side, but people don't want to pay for it, or it's not in their budget, or it doesn't work for them. But we do feel that the more people that pay for private do open up spots for people that don't. So I think there is a good mix model healthcare outcomes may be different because if you only see your doctor 3 times a year and you have some complex issues, things are going to get fast-tracked, not on the good side.
I'm interested to know, Jordan, how the government views all of this, because recently nurse practitioner clinics began popping up, which were something we didn't have until it became pretty obvious that healthcare was in a pretty serious crisis.
The healthcare is very complex of how you negotiate, how you talk to them. It starts at your division of family practice. So Qualcomm Parts has their own. Victoria has 2 of them. So you have to start with them. And it's interesting because the division, their job is to find innovation technologies to help bring better healthcare as a foundation. But then once they approve it, it goes to the Ministry of Health to sign off and give the funding. And there's a huge gap. We spent about 9 months working with the local division here in Victoria. We had a signed contract. It was actually a great model. We did a pilot. So we spent $30,000 on a pilot to go into a few care communities. It was a doctor, and they went door knocking. And so they went door to door. So doctor would bring the medicine bag and actually do in-person visits. The Division of Family Practice liked it. They wanted to fund it. But then unfortunately, the deputy minister and the minister, our minister, didn't. They said, they came back to your full profit. We can't support you. Even though it worked in the division like this, then we had to leave. And so the upsetting part was like, now we just dropped 200 seniors and they're your full profit, Jordan, and you don't have a brick and mortar clinic. Why build a clinic when seniors cancel 30% of the time? So why don't you just go to that? And that's not our department. That's another division. It was just very complex. It depends which side of the government you're on. Conservatives believe in a model where there is a middle ground, I think, to work with private providers to collaborate, where I think the NDP and the Green are they just see it in a different way. It is interesting to see and sometimes sad to see that there's too much talent in BC and we complain that there's no healthcare workers when there's so many. Like at one point we had 60 nurse practitioner applications. And so we shared the data with the minister and they said, "Can you send me their resumes?" No, but just let you know, there's talent out there. We propose use us as the short stop and then just end us. Just do a 6 month. And then we tried in Williams Lake. We talked to the MLA there. Their hands were tied. They just said it has to come from the Ministry of Health, and everyone liked it. I think there's a good opportunity to happen or come, and maybe in the new legislation, there's something that will come from it, and maybe they work together and really focus on the people versus the red tape and politics. But there is a ton of talent in BC.
You mentioned, Jordan, that you didn't have a background in healthcare when you started all of this. I'm sure you've learned a lot of lessons as you've gone along. What were some of the real eye-openers for you?
I think what's actually helpful too is building a team. Me not having a background actually helped because I'm very open. And so if we just put patient first, you get a lot of ideas and they want patients first too, and so do I. And so it's interesting when you run a system where appointments are 30 minutes long, smaller patient panels, you actually start building a team and let's add this now. Okay, let's do. And so me not having a background, I think has helped me do what we're doing now, opposed to having a background. So I have the pros that do healthcare and then you have the operations that work well together. I think the eye-opener is the opportunity that being in Canada, you can actually really make a difference, do the leverage the talent we have and maybe tweak some things and just becoming an outsider in, seeing what patients say and feedback that we get. We see so much result of going, that person just was in the system, they probably wouldn't make it till next year. And so you see that and you're going, how can we share that journey? I've learned is we got a long ways to go. And primary care is, I'd say, just a small portion of it. Once we start getting into specialists retiring, and those are doctors that are retiring, that are specialists, so we'll see a backlog. We got a lot of work to do. I tried to work and partner with the government bodies, and it's just interesting that they could just be more open arms at this stage in our healthcare life. But I really appreciate the folks that have leaned in such a small company and said, you're going the right direction. And so we're happy for the team we have, we're happy for the health professionals we have, our investors that believe in what we're doing.
Any advice for potential entrepreneurs?
It all depends what industry you do, but I think you just have to be open to ideas and listen to your users. When you always do a startup, it's always nice to have that feedback. You start building with little cost, and then you start fundraising. So being an entrepreneur, I think, is go out there, don't be scared to go out of rooms and go to those events and just network. Everyone's in the same boat. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're in the same room, you're in the same boat. You've gone through the ups, you've gone through the downs. I don't have a co-founder. It's always good to start with a co-founder or a few, just because gets pretty lonely. You got nowhere to celebrate too. We have a win, so it's this lonely space to be in. But I think over time, and if you're passionate about it, and just listen to your customers, and you create something really cool.
Jordan, thanks for your time. I know you're a busy guy. Thanks for being with us on the podcast.
No worries. Yeah, happy anytime.
It's wonderful to see Jordan building a successful business and helping solve some of the issues surrounding doctor shortages at the same time. Welcome news indeed. Hey, we'll be back after this word.
The Pulse Community Podcast is sponsored in part by the SOS. For more than 55 years, the SOS Caring for Community at Christmas program has ensured that local children, youth, adults, and seniors experience the joy of the holidays. The thrill of finding a gift under the tree, the happiness that comes from sharing food that has special meaning. To donate to the SOS Caring for Community at Christmas program, visit sosd69.com or call 250-248-2093.
Hey, Dave, as you know, I like to use my imagination a little bit. And you and I are both going to get a chance to do that, not only with the Pulse podcast, but with another set of podcasts that we're putting together. I'm sure anybody with young kids, maybe ages 3 to 7 or 8, will enjoy, because today's children books are really podcasts. You can download them to your phone. The kids can enjoy them that way. So Dave and I are going to be bringing you a separate podcast called Skookum Kid Stories. They're delightful original stories about a boy named Peter and his Eskimo dog Gracie. They're always finding adventure. And Dave, you've got a podcast as well.
Oh, yes, I do be listening for the delightful adventures of Captain Dave of the Mellow Submarine in Deep Bay. He and Larry the Lobster find excitement above and below the waterline, and I can't wait to get into this series.
You'll find the Pulse podcasts and Skookum Kid Stories on thepulsecommunity.ca, skookumkids.com, as well as Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon, and YouTube as well.
And if you would like to contact us about suggesting guests for the podcast or to send us comments or voice messages, you'll find our contact information and links on the website and in the show notes. Being our inaugural podcast, Peter, I thought maybe I'd take a quick minute just to use these scientifically designed questions to really plumb the depths of your soul. You may answer honestly or jokingly or otherwise. We'll just rattle these off. Coffee or tea?
Decaf coffee.
Rock and roll or country?
Southern country rock.
Nice choice. If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
To make money magically appear.
Wow, Marvel hasn't thought of that one yet. And although this is not the end of the questions forever, name something that remains on your bucket list.
I had 2 on my bucket list, which I don't think one I'm going to be able to handle. And that was, for years, I always wanted to do the ascent to Machu Picchu.
Oh, wow.
But now I'm getting old and the hips and the knees don't work as well as they used to and all of that. So I can see somebody taking me up on a burro maybe, but I don't think I'm going to make it on my own. The other I can do on my own, and that is the Speyside tour in Scotland of distilleries.
Oh, yes. Nice choice.
Thank you.
All right. Let's plan ahead to do this again, shall we?
Yes, I think we should. Next Tuesday?
Perfect.
All right, Dave, let's head down to the cafeteria and see what Mabel has on the special for today.
Mabel tells me that they have the $5 special on right now, and I hear it's half as good as the $10 special, and I think it's your turn to buy.
Of course it is.
Here come Peter, here comes Dave. Oh, listen. Bringing stories, making waves. No missing. Spinning tales in the podcast cave. So listening. Laughs and insights everywhere. What a treat. Peter and Dave, they're on the mic, so